Okay, Google, turn on the sexy kitchen.
Sure, turning on the kitchen cabinets.
Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my kitchen. I have been working on this remodel for a long time here. I got most of it done last month and, the month of October. And I just was a bunch of other little things I was trying to dribble on and trying to get up everything for November. And now I finally have it all done. And so I'm really happy, and I wanted to show you a couple different things, particularly making a solid surface countertop with all hand tools. Now, it would be much easier to use power tools, but I wanted to kind of experiment and stretch myself and see, can it be done? I had a lot of people telling me you cannot work with a solid surface or Corian countertop. You cannot do it with just hand tools. It will dull the tools too quickly. And yes, it did dull the tools very quickly, and I had to sharpen them more often. But I was able to do it, even including carving out this corner, putting in the backsplash, making everything in this, seaming it together with just hand tools. So I figure let's take a look at how we did it. So this is not where I start most of my projects, but this is a solid sheet of solid surface countertop, or it's a Corian off-brand, and it's a 30 inches by 12 foot long and just a ½ inch thick. So how am I going to turn this into a countertop? Well, first thing I need to do is cut it into shape. And I need to basically cut it into an L shape. And I'm going to do this with a handsaw. I thought at first, it would probably be easier to do it with a crosscut saw, but I found out very quickly that the ripping saw went far faster. I did this whole process using one saw on one sharpening, but when I was done, it was as dull as could be and needed to be sharpened. The first thing I need to do is start ripping off the backsplash. This will be a 3½ inch wide strip the whole length. And then I also need to cut off a bunch of little 1-inch strips. So I'm going to be making several cuts lengthwise that are 3½ inch wide and 1 inch wide. Those will be the bull nose for the 1-inch strips and then the backsplash for the 3½ inch strips. And it's slow going, but it does cut. It actually cuts better than I expected. With a bit of work, you can rip all the way from one end to the other, and you get a nice strip that comes off. It took me probably about 20 minutes per cut, and I think I had to do 4 or 5 cuts lengthwise. So it took a good while, but once I got it all done, I was very pleased, and we can actually go into the starting of the building of it. With everything cut, the next thing I need to do is actually start jointing everything up. Particularly, there's going to be one seam in the L end of it, so I need to seam together these, and I'm doing exactly what I would do with wood. I'm just going to joint it together. So planing down the two edges until I get a perfectly flat, smooth surface that these two fit together and joint together. It planes fairly well. It doesn't get curls. They're more like this weird chips and fuzz that come off. Yeah, it actually works fairly well. Now I need to glue this down to a substrate to hold it up. So the substrate is 3/4 inch particle board, and that will basically just glue to this. And I'm going to use a contact cement. I apply it first to the solid surface countertop and then to the particle board because the particle board will dry faster. Once these two have been smeared on and they start to get tacky, then I bring in my beautiful assistant, and she helps me flip this over and glue them down into place. This took a good bit of wiggling, as this was well over her how much she wanted to lift, but they actually they came together, and you'll notice how the Corian actually will overlap the substrate by about 1.25 inches. This will allow me to have a space to build up a bull nose in the front. After laying it in place, I clamped it down with everything I had, including the old cabinets, to make sure that I had a good bond between the substrate and the surface itself. The last thing I need to do is that one piece that I need to join on to finish off the L on this. Now here I'm using an epoxy that comes with the solid surface. This is colored to match the surface so that the epoxy disappears when it's done. It fills any void, and really I was amazed at the joints on this. They just disappear. You can't see them at all. So that gets glued down with the the contact cement, and then epoxy in between the countertops. So anywhere the countertop connects the countertop, the solid surface connects to the solid surface, I'll use that epoxy to connect it down. So then I clamp this all in place, and I'll use the bar clamps to clamp the countertop itself together, and then use every squeeze clamp I have to glue it down to the substrate. After that's done, we can start working on the bowl nose. So I flip it over, and basically this is a half inch thick material. So I want to build it up to be 1.5 inches thick at the bowl nose front. So that means I need to layer up 3 layers of this to come to my 1.5 inches. First thing I'm going to use is a solvent and clean the surface and clean all of these so the epoxy has a perfect binding surface between them. And then I'm going to use that epoxy gun. I really like that thing with the mixing tips. They say it's ready to work with in about 20 minutes. I let it sit for a little longer than that. I think I let them sit for like 2 to 3 hours before actually starting to work on it, and it glued down very quickly. So I lay a layer down, clamp it down in place, and then come back, trim off everything, and then lay on the next layer. Now in the very corner here, I'm actually building in a little extra material, so I have a block about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches that I build out that corner. This will allow me to put a rounded surface in there as opposed to just having a 90-degree corner. I wanted that rounded inside edge, just makes it look a little bit sharper. So then I do the exact same thing and repeat for the third layer on the bowl nose. Once this is done, then we can actually start doing the shaping on this and actually working through shaping the bowl nose and the corner. Particularly on this corner, I wanted to do a rounded surface, so I drew a round arc on there, and then I used my jeweler's scroll saw or a fret saw to remove most of the material and get me that rounded shape. Then I came in with files and shaped out this corner. I used the files and rasps just like I would for sculpting a handle, rounding the corner and then beveling it on the top and bottom. The other thing is I had this joint, the epoxy beaded up on it, and I was really kind of happy. This is a lot of fun scraping off the excess epoxy. It didn't adhere very well to the surface because there was no pressure holding it together, but in between the pieces it held amazingly well. It just becomes one solid piece. The next thing I need to do is flatten the front edge, and I'm going to use a block plane to smooth everything out and bring it all down to the same spot. So it's a perfectly flat edge all the way across the front. And the block plane, I think, was my preferred usage for this. It was easier to sharpen and just fairly quick. So every 4 or 5 minutes I'd stop, take it apart, sharpen it quickly, and be back at work. I got to the point where I could sharpen in 45 seconds or less, so it didn't take that much time. The next thing I want to do is round the top and bottom to about a 3/8 radius round over, and I just did that by slowly going at them with a block plane from one end to the other. And with a little bit of time, it worked out fairly well. For the radius right in the front, I got as close as I could with the block plane and then came in with a chisel and basically carved that inside corner. This probably took me a good hour to do, and it took a little while, but was worth every moment of it. I really liked how this came out. This is kind of the pride and joy of this whole project, is this inside corner. Really, really happy with how it came out. Now the last thing I have to do is cut in a sink, and for the sink well, you can see the lines are laid out, but I need to cut the corners, and I want the corners to be rounded. Now I was planning on originally using an auger bit, but the problem was the lead screw won't pull through the Corian, so I have to drill out a bit for the lead screw to slide in, and then that allows the lead screw to go down through it. This took forever to get through that solid surface. It probably took about 5 minutes. In the end, I did the other 3 with a hole saw, but unfortunately the hole saw and cutting the lines, that video footage just disappeared, as well as some of the later video footage. But I used a keyhole saw to cut between those holes. The last thing I need to do before taking it inside is to sand it all down, buff it into shape. And one of the beautiful things about Corian is if you ever get scratches in it, you can just sand it down and buff it out. Just with a quick hand sanding and then a Scotch-Brite pad, and you're left with that beautiful surface. And just a quick bit of work with your hand, and it is done. I ended up waxing it as well. I'm just rubbing in a paste wax, and I might do that occasionally. And I am really, really happy with how this surface came out. So anytime in the future you get a scratch, just sand it lightly and then buff it out with the Scotch-Brite. The last thing after bringing it in, that was the video footage I lost, is screwing it down to the countertop. So you just have screws coming up through the cabinets into the countertop itself. Then the backsplash, which we cut off earlier, I rounded over that edge with about a 1/4 inch radius, just a smaller one. That gets applied to the wall and the cabinet with clear silicone caulk, and just a light bead on the countertop itself, tied up to the wall, will keep the water from ever going between the backsplash and the countertop. Then any place where the two Corian pieces touch, I put in a little bit of that epoxy that will fill any of the gaps, and the color will match perfectly. And then I just push it into place and let the caulk hold it. And voila, it is basically done. There's just one little more piece here. I had to put a seam there because I just didn't have enough of the backsplash to go all the way around. But these seams just absolutely disappeared. That caulk just... it's phenomenal. You cannot find the seams. I know where they're at, and I'm looking for them, and I can't find them. I'm really happy with how this came out. It's an easy material to work with. It will dull tools quickly, but it is worth all the fun. And especially this inside corner, that was just a blast to make and really enjoyable. I was very happy with how that came out. Yes, you can work with a solid surface countertop with hand tools, and I'll probably be using it in the future. So there you have it. This was a really fun project for me, and I am just ecstatic with how it came out. It was far easier than I had expected. This was really a simple project. It really didn't take that much at all. And I have this countertop that I'm in love with. This is exactly what I want. I know it's not everyone's dream countertop, but it is mine. So yes, this was a lot of fun, and you can do it too. It really doesn't take that much. And if you have power tools, a router and a circular saw, this would be a lot easier and a lot quicker. So yes, it can be done. And I'm also thinking about using Corian now for a few other projects. Maybe turning something with it, maybe something of that nature. I don't know. Let's play with it. I have some scraps left over. We'll see where it goes. So I do want to say thank you to the patrons on Patreon. You are the people who allow me to do crazy things like working with a Corian countertop and hand tools. If you'd like to find out more about Patreon, you can do so right down there. I don't have any sponsored videos on this channel, so everything I get is from you, the viewers, and thank you for that. Also, if you'd like to subscribe and see some more behind the scenes footage, you can do that as well. That's about it for today, and until next time, have a wonderful day.